Hey everyone, GuardianE here with another video for the global version of Destiny Child. We're here today to talk about and give an update on the much anticipated Lisa's Extra missions, and just provide a quick guide on how you may want to approach the event. So let's talk about the logistics first. Lisa's Extra missions is an amazing event. It's a perfect time for new players to jump into the game, an excellent way for veterans to further bolster their accounts. You get a host of free max 6-star plus 6 units, including top tier units that have been top tier since the beginning of the game. Them being fully maxed and plus 6 is the equivalent of summoning 7 whole copies of that unit. So it really is just a huge jumpstart, a huge boost to any account, and it's brain dead easy to accomplish. Like, this is meant for newer players. It's extremely easy. All you have to do is basically participate to complete the event. So the event first occurred during Destiny Child's anniversary. It's made its reappearance for this month, so if you're considering jumping into the game at all, now is absolutely the time to do it. It's the perfect time to do it. The event runs from April 23rd until May 28th. As soon as you start the event by logging in or creating an account, as soon as the event starts, you have, I believe it's 14 days, it might be 10 days, it's either 14 or 10 days, but basically the clock starts ticking as soon as you start the event, so you just want to be aware of that. It's not a huge time crunch or anything, you basically just have to participate each day, but, for people who are, very super casual and, very busy and, they may not be able to, you just want to bear that in mind. As soon as you log in, that's when the clock starts ticking on the event itself. So now with that out of the way, let's talk about how it works and who you may want to consider choosing. One disclaimer, these are my opinions on who you should choose. And while I think a lot of them are pretty universal, especially for newer players, people are free to disagree, and, you should ultimately pick who you want. It's your account, that's who you're going to be using and be stuck with, so, if it's a character, if a top-tier character is a character design that you hate, then, you don't have to pick them. Pick somebody else. It's your freedom, it's your account, you can do with it what you want. So as I just mentioned, Lisa's Extra missions, as soon as it activates, there are 7 lessons here, as you can see. Lessons 1 through 7, and each of them corresponds to a day of the event. Each day, another lesson will open up, and you just have to complete the quest that's for that day in order to acquire the reward that's listed below. Pretty self-explanatory. So Lesson 1 has a whole bunch of very powerful 5-star units. Lesson 2 and Day 2 will have 4-star water units. Lesson 3 will have 4-star fire units. Lesson 4 will have 4-star grass. Lesson 5 will have 4-star light, and Lesson 6 will have 4-star dark units. So 4-star units are obviously more common. They can be merged uncapped and evolved into 6-star plus 6s. That's why you are still getting a powerful unit, they're just not native 5 stars. Lesson 7 is also a 5-star exclusive unit. So of the days, of the lessons, Lesson 1 and Lesson 7 are the most important. Those are the most bang for your buck, the hardest units to be able to plus 6, and probably the ones that are going to be doing the most damage or having the biggest effect on your account itself. At the end of it, after you've completed everything and gone through all of the lessons, like I said, you can't do it all in one go. Each of the lessons kind of opens up after a day, so it's encouraging you to participate each day. At the end of it, once you've completed all the lessons, or after the kind of time has run out, 7 days, as you can see here that Lisa's saying, grading begins in 7 days, Lisa will give you a grade. So you can get an A+, a B, or a D, and depending on that, you get a certain number of rewards. There is absolutely no reason for you to not get an A+. So let's just assume you're going to get an A+, because as long as you do all of the lessons, you'll get an A+. And like I said, they're brain dead easy, and we'll talk about them. But you'll get 3 final rewards. So at the end of it, you'll be able to pick 3 of these rewards down here, which is each of these color-corresponded 5-star tickets, which is awesome. So 5-star water summon ticket, fire, grass, light, dark. And you can even view the rates by clicking on the rate button just to see who's listed and who's available in the actual summons. So that's actually awesome too. Just in case you wanted another 5-star, you're basically getting a total of 5 guaranteed free native 5-star units. 2 of them you can actually choose, and then 3 of them you can at least choose the color for them. So that's pretty amazing, right? So let's go through the lessons one at a time just to show you how easy it is to complete them, and you can complete them probably without even thinking about it and even looking at this. We'll just talk about it very briefly. So Lesson 1, fight 3 battles in story mode on any difficulty. That's takes 2 seconds. Use 30 stamina total. You do 1 run of the the forest walk for the spa, that's 30 stamina right there. And in fact, the 30 stamina that you use during story mode is going to add to that as well. Lesson 2, level any child to level 10. That is super easy. Level a skill on any child, super easy. Extract Onyx for lesson 3, awaken a child to D class. Just using Onyx will get you to lesson 4, lesson 3, lesson 4. Sell an item for 500 gold. Most items out there that you sell will be worth 500 gold. Fight 5 battles in story mode. Again, super easy. Lesson 5, fight in Night World. Daily material dungeon. You want to do that anyway just to get materials for your units. Doing that, and then the underground as well, on any difficulty. You can do it on easy, it doesn't matter. Lesson 6, Night World Exploration. You should be doing that passively for 2-star farming, or just to stick your units in there to get some levels. Lesson 7, join Devil Rumbles in the Night World. That is very, very easy too. You just have to join them. You only have to win one of the ones that you participate in. So you go into the Night World, Devil Rumble right here, it's the PvP. Just go in there, participate 3 times, and you're good. So again, just to drive home how simple it is to actually complete these, all you have to make sure to do, the trickiest part is just making sure you log in every day. Because if you skip multiple days, a lot of days, then it's conceivable that you could miss out and actually not be able to complete the event. So just remember, as soon as you log in, and I know I'm sounding like a broken record now, as soon as you log in or as soon as you create your account, the time starts ticking, the clock starts ticking. So just be aware of that. So now let's start talking about the units themselves. So obviously, like I said, Lesson 1 and Lesson 7 are the most important. Those are the native 5 stars that you can choose from. They actually made changes from the original Lisa's Extra Missions. I think Mott was removed from this, and they ended up adding like Rita and some others. So that's actually kind of an interesting change. It's kind of nice, I think. Losing Mott is unfortunate because I think she is a potential choice for newer players. It's actually good for veterans to be able to get +6s of characters of newer characters that they haven't been able to. Something else I will note, if you are an Uber Whale, you have all of these at +6 already, and you don't give a damn about what you're going to be choosing here, this is still good for you, because what you can do is you can grab one of these native 5 stars and then split them into the 7 5 stars that comprise that one 6-star +6, and then all you have to do at that point, you can use them as House of Reincarnation fodder. I mean, really, there's no downside. You can now use that to actually get a merge or an uncap for an existing character that you want. So just kind of look at it from that perspective if you are a veteran and none of these appeal to you. So on Lesson 1, I think it's kind of a slam dunk choice. If you're a newer player here, Chang'e is really the choice you should be making. Chang'e is top tier, has been since day one, is top tier in every game mode, PvE, PvP, raid bosses, whether it's in world bosses. She frankly just makes most teams better. She is really that good and that strong. So this is absolutely the number one choice that you should be making if you're a newer player. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that her slide skill grants skill gauge charge amount plus a certain percentage for 2 turns. That's phenomenal. That really speeds up and amplifies your team and the amount of DPS it does. Also just gets more skills out the door, whether it's debuffing or buffing skills. Slide skill cooldown -2 seconds for 2 allies. Again, it just increases the efficiency and potency of all of the other units on your team. So that's why Chang'e is the natural choice. That's why she is so strong. I think that even players that have Chang'e at +2 or +3, you may still want to get with the +6 here. She's that good. Now, for those of you who have a +4 or a +5 Chang'e, I understand, may want to go with another choice because over the course of the game, it's very likely you'll be getting those 2 uncaps at some point. So, totally get, waiting and deferring if you're getting a +4, if you have a +4 Chang'e. But for almost everyone else that doesn't have a +6 Chang'e, this is probably going to be your pick for Lesson 1. But that's not to say that the other choices aren't excellent, and if you have a +6 Chang'e, these are other options to consider. So after Chang'e, I personally think it's kind of a 3-way tie a little bit in terms of who you would go for. Obviously, the one of these that you have the fewest uncaps for, Syrinx is excellent. So Syrinx is a PvP healer, basically. She has a healer that casts Fortitude. So Fortitude makes your units invulnerable in PvP. The reason why this is so critical is because there are certain skills in PvP that nullify healing, but Fortitude prevents damage at all. So Syrinx is one of the key choices, I would say, in PvP in general. There are other choices now. In the beginning of the game, she was like the only choice. There are more choices now, but I think Syrinx is still an excellent choice for PvP. She's still an excellent healer in general. She's still good to bring along in other game modes, especially world bosses, depending on the color of the world boss. But yeah, definitely worth considering. Syrinx, if you want to bolster your PvP team, she's definitely up there. Jupiter is awesome at high uncaps, and you're getting him at high uncaps. You're getting him at +6, so at his maximum efficiency and proficiency and potency, he inflicts bleed damage is the big thing for him. And so he works really well on Ragnas in PvP. He works really well in world bosses as well. Also debuffs or nullifies the enemy's defense. So he's just a strong debuffer in general. It's worth noting that he does have a waifu skin. If you don't necessarily like his default look, you can obviously go for the waifu skin instead. But he's a great choice as well, and I would say a little bit more universal than Syrinx personally. The third of the group, Cube Moa. Cube Moa has her moments. I mean, she can do some good stuff in PvP especially. She casts that Petrify. Certain team compositions really excel with her. So she's certainly a choice. I think probably a ringer with the other three in terms of kind of the next step down from Chang'e. So you may want to consider using her. And then beyond that, speaking of PvP, we have Olga here. So Olga, I would say personally, and again this is my opinion. I think Olga's fallen a little bit from grace. He used to be the PvP meta. I mean, one of the key components to PvP meta for sure at the start of the game for a while. I think he's still strong, but the main reason for that is he casts Silence. Casts Silence on the opposing team, which essentially, as you can see here, blocks skills and resets the skill gauge, which is huge. I mean, that's huge because that gives your entire team a leg up on the opposing team. So yeah, Olga's really strong, has been in PvP. I think pretty much exclusively in PvP, and that's really it. So, if you're looking for an all-rounder, Olga's not going to be it. If you're looking for a boost to your PvP team, Olga could be it. But I think there are, again, other choices that you could pick and still be very proficient in PvP. So that's why I'm kind of rating Olga lower than the others that I just mentioned. But he's still strong, and he does have a manservice husbando skin if you end up wanting to elect to change his default here. So that's lesson 1 in a nutshell. Again, I think the runaway choice is Chang'e for newer players, and for anybody that doesn't have a +4, +5, or +6 Chang'e, she is going to be that critical choice. I would say after that, it's probably Jupiter, then Syrinx and Cube Moa I would place it at. And then, maybe Olga after that. And then beyond that, it's just kind of super situational, super niche. I would really only recommend getting one of the other ones if you absolutely love their design, for one thing, or if you have +6 already of the other units available. So moving on to Lesson 2, Day 2. Now, as I mentioned before, these are native 4 stars, not native 5 stars. They've just been awakened and evolved into 6 stars +6. But don't get it twisted, they have a lot of value. They can definitely sort of round out and supplement the damage that you're doing, especially in something like World Boss, where you have a veritable army that you're putting together against a boss. They can absolutely be incredibly valuable to your box. So this selection is still important. It may not be as critical as Lesson 1 or Lesson 7, but it's still key. There's also a potential incoming game mode that we don't have yet on Global, where you might be restricted from not using 5 stars or native 5 stars. So again, this is another just opportunity to build up that barracks, that box, your army essentially, to be able to take those challenges on. So lesson 2 is going to be water-based 4 stars. So I would say that probably the top 2 here are going to be Elysian. So Elysian, in addition to just having an awesome design, she is basically on the other servers, on Korea and on the Japanese server, basically a weaker Eve. We'll talk about her a little bit later, but Eve is basically one of the best attackers in the game, and Elysian, it just happens to be kind of a weaker Eve. So as a 4-star, she can actually work pretty well as a water attacker. Certainly potent, has the poisoning ability. She's not quite as strong as I believe that she is on the Korean and the Japanese versions. I think they did change her up a little bit, but all the same, she is still a very, very strong choice here. The other option is Sonnet, who is also a water attacker. Again, just getting more DPS for water. She was solid before I had Eve and before I had Elysian. I was using Sonnet, had her merged and and awakened, and she did great work for me. So absolutely a wonderful option as well. If you don't want Elysian, or you already have Elysian already maxed, Sonnet is also a great choice. And then the last notable candidate is going to be Mayahuel here. So Maya, he actually is a relatively decent water supporter, speed water supporter. especially when you're getting him at +6. He can put in a lot of work. So this is an option. You know, you can certainly get him as well. Moving on to lesson 3, which is the Fire 4-star, Fire native 4 stars. So of the batch here, I think first and foremost we want to talk about Frisia. Frisia is pretty awesome. So Frisia here is definitely a standout. I love her design, by the way. She looks great. But she's basically an alternative to Jupiter in a way, but not a straight alternative to Jupiter. So we talked about Jupiter during lesson 1 and how he bleeds, but he also provides a defense down effect. Frisia actually has defense down, which is a very potent ability, especially for something like World Boss. And it's a fixed amount rather than Jupiter's, which scales, which means that on sort of mid-difficulty stuff, Frisia actually performs better. So there's definitely value in having Frisia maxed and upgraded all the way. If you don't have her, definitely consider getting her at +6, because I think that she is going to be valuable. The next option I would call attention to here is Yuna. Yuna is actually a pretty darn good fire attacker at +6, level 60. So she, despite being a 4-star, she's actually pretty strong. If we take a look at her stats here, she does hit 3 times with her slide, does bonus damage to wood types, and just has solid stats. So again, Yuna's a great choice, especially when you're trying to, specifically for world bosses, and we'll be talking about this again a little bit later, you want a lot of fire attackers because of a potential strategy that you can use. And if you can't get, 5 or 6 fire 5-star native 5-star fire attackers, Yuna's a great choice because she does actually even outshine some native 5-star fire attackers that are out there. So Yuna's great. I mean, if you want to go for her instead of Frisia, that's an option as well. For lesson 4, we have the grass native 4 stars, and the 2 really of note are going to be the attackers. So we've got Amor here, who's actually pretty darn decent as a grass attacker. I was talking about Sonnet before. Amor was basically my green or grass fire attacker when I started the game because I did not have any decent grass fire attackers, and she did a pretty good job, especially when you get her at +6. She's going to be dishing some pretty decent damage. Alongside Amor is also Tisiphone. Tisiphone's design is so good, but yeah, Tisiphone also. But again, yeah, Tisiphone also wood attacker, pretty solid. Nothing exceptional, I would say, about either of them, but they both kind of do the job, and I think that if you're strapped for selecting one of the group here, those are kind of the standouts. Selene is an okay option as well as a healer. There's just a lot of better healer options out there. If you already have Tisiphone and you already have Amor both at +6, then maybe consider Selene, but those would be basically my recommendations. So Lesson 5 has native 4-star light units available, and I think probably the 2 standouts here are going to be Arato. Arato is a light supporter, actually kind of works the dual role as a healer as well. Unfortunately, like I said, I think there are just a lot of good healers out there, especially even 4-star healers like Lita. Lita is an amazing, amazing 4-star healer in the game that actually surpasses a lot of 5-star healers. So again, you're not hurting for options really. But Arato's here. I mean, you can certainly build her up. She does look great too. There's also Victorix here, who is a decent light attacker as a 4-star. I certainly wouldn't say that she's exceptional, but as a 4-star attacker, she does pretty decently if you need to kind of add additional light attackers into your team, like a world boss team or something like that. Also Hercules here, who honestly I don't think I'd pick unless you had Arato and Victorix already, at +6. But Hercules, I've seen him used before on certain compositions as a defender. There aren't that many defenders, light defenders out there that are native 4-stars, so he's there. I mean, I don't know if I would necessarily pick him over the other 2. In fact, I know I wouldn't pick him over the other 2. So Lesson 6 features dark native 4-star units. The standout here is pretty much going to be Melpomene. So Melpomene is a dark supporter, and her role is essentially to boost crit rate and crit damage. In this game, crit damage is actually huge, especially for Ragna breaks and things like that. Crit damage can really elevate your overall DPS if your team is centered around it. And Pantheon is a dark supporter, a native 5-star dark supporter, that has that same role where he boosts crit damage as well as crit rate. And they can really just tear through a boss with the right team composition. So Melpomene also fulfills that role, and at high merges, high uncaps, does a very comparable role to Pantheon. So in that regard, if you don't have Pantheon, or even if you do have Pantheon, Melpomene is not a bad choice. She can definitely be a huge boon for your team, and when you're taking on certain, especially when you're manualing on Ragna breaks, trying to kind of break the damage ceilings possible. So Melpomene is absolutely a great choice here. Otherwise, I would point to Morrigan here as a dark attacker. Solid, nothing exceptional, but I think, if you need another dark attacker, she's solid for sure if you want to kind of add her into your team. There's also Artemis, who is also a dark attacker. Again, I think both Morrigan and Artemis, kind of take your pick of which one you like more, but I think really, at the end of the day, it's kind of a coin flip. If you don't want to go for Melpomene, I think that these other two are pretty good options, but Melpomene is probably the best out of the batch. Lesson 7, Day 7, is full of native 5 stars, and this is where it gets to be a little bit tricky. So, for beginner players, the two optimal choices are either Eve, right here, Forbidden Eve, who is one of the best attackers in the game, or Dana, who is one of the best defenders in the game. So we talked a little bit about Eve before. Let's talk a little bit more about what she does. So the reason why Eve is so strong and one of the best attackers in the game for basically any game mode is that she poisons the enemy, and her poison damage is very high. It's very strong. And the way poison works in this game is that it's borderline overpowered, it's damage over time, and the effect lasts for 3 turns. And when I say 3 turns, that means the enemy's 3 full rotation turns. Like, they act 3 times. And over the course of that, every single attack that they do, every single attack that they take or hit, they receive, will all do tick damage. They will all do this poison damage over time. So over the course of like doing a fever or doing something that hits multiple times, every single time something hits the enemy that's poisoned, they'll take poison damage. So that's why it's so powerful, and that's why Eve is such an excellent option in any game mode. She excels in them all, whether it's PvP, whether it's PvE, whether it's a raid boss or a world boss, anything like that, she will be supplementing damage. There are very rare instances in which she will not be making you do more damage. So she's just that good. And getting her at level 60 plus 6 with max skills is a huge boon. The difference really being if you already have an Eve at plus 4 or so, plus 3 even maybe, she might be doing enough for you where you don't really need to kind of quote-unquote waste your pick in this allotment of choices for an Eve. But even then, Eve would not be a wasted choice. She's just that strong. If we talk about Dana similarly, comparably, a top tier defender. The reason why she's so strong is that her slide puts up a shield for for 5 allies. And the general team composition in Destiny Child is 5 allies. And so that means the entire team gets shielded. It's a pretty significant shield. They're not going to take any damage throughout it. And during that process, they can get, all of those buffs. They can heal back to full. And the actual cooldown for the slide is relatively low. So you can basically chain shields over and over again. It does wonders for your survivability, especially early on. And even in the late game, it's still very, very strong. It's a very strong effect. They try to counter it with a couple... There are counters to it, I should say. But especially for newer players, Dana is also an excellent choice. So between Eve and Dana, it's kind of a toss-up depending on what you want. I will say that one quote-unquote weakness of Dana is that in world bosses, when you have a ton of units, like 20 units, clearly Dana only puts up the shield for 5 units. So it's not as though she's that good there. There are better choices for world bosses rather than Dana, which we will be talking about a little bit later in this selection. But all in all, she's not a bad choice for World Boss, and she's also excellent pretty much everywhere else. So, yeah. Maximum survivability, or huge survivability, I should say, versus, huge damage is basically kind of the coin flip. I will say that, getting another unit that does what Dana does is a little bit harder than getting, a big attacker or a high attacker. If you get other attackers in the game that can support the DPS on your team, or other poisoners like we talked about Elysian, or other 5 stars that you can use, heck, that might be a reason why you would pick Dana over Eve. If you just want to go raw damage and you have other mechanisms for defending, then maybe you want to go for Eve instead of Dana. So those two are definitely the highlights of Lesson 7 without question. If you don't have either of them, those really should be where you gravitate towards. But ultimately, I would say you really honestly can't go wrong with either if you're a new player. Either one will do wonders for your account. So, take your pick. I tried to outline the pros and cons of each, so you can make an educated decision that's what works best for your account. Now, if you're not interested in Dana, or you're not interested in Eve, or you already have them at high uncaps and you don't want to kind of spend your Lesson 7 on that, there are definitely some other very, very powerful options. One of those is Mars here. So we were talking about how one of Dana's kind of deficiencies is that she doesn't excel in World Boss, whereas Mars does. So Mars is a water defender, and her slide skill, I believe it is, yes, her slide skill ends up putting up a barrier for all of her allies, which means all 20 units in the World Boss ends up getting that defense boost, that barrier that gets up, that shield, which is huge. She is pretty much the best defender for World Boss. So for that purpose, definitely, if you don't have her at +6, this is definitely a consideration. She is going to excel there for sure. Other options are going to be... Frey here is, much to my chagrin, one of the best dark attackers in the game. Especially his abilities scale well with uncaps. You're getting him at max uncap, so clearly he's going to be doing a lot of damage. If you need a dark attacker, he is definitely worth taking a look at. Another relatively decent attacker is Morrigan. Morrigan is one of the better fire attackers in the game. You're going to get her at 60 +6, and she does good damage, for sure. So if you need another fire attacker, and like I mentioned, it's worthwhile having a good number of really powerful fire attackers on your team for world bosses for a specific tactic that we'll go into in a little bit. Morrigan's not a terrible choice if you can get her at +6, which you can here. So speaking of that strategy, we do have C-Day also available at +6. And the reason why I wanted to emphasize C-Day is a little bit different. She's a fire defender, but her main role in World Boss is going to be her slide skill, which activates Double-Edged Sword for up to 5 fire-type allies. And what that essentially does is it doubles the attack of fire allies and then also doubles the damage that they take. In fact, more than doubles. And so that kind of equalizes the damage. You have effective damage based upon the colors in this game, as with most gacha games. But basically for any world boss, if you bring along fire attackers and bring along C-Day, that kind of equalizes, nullifies, and makes their damage really high regardless because of that. So that is kind of a very powerful strategy with C-Day. If you don't have C-Day at +6, might be worth looking into. She's definitely a great unit, and she's very cute too, but she's definitely a great unit to have for those instances. And then finally, I'm going to point out GuardianE is a decent choice for a wood attacker at high uncap. She does some decent damage. There's not a lot of flourish there as far as what she brings to the table, but she's going to, she's going to add to that DPS, and she's going to be a solid choice for a wood attacker in general if you are starved for one. So at the end of the day, Lesson 7 is a little bit more difficult to recommend somebody out of the gate. I think Eve and Dana for sure are going to be the choices for newer players, or for anybody that doesn't have both of those at very high uncaps already. I think the runner-ups after those two, it's really going to come down to what your preference or what your needs are. As far as attackers are concerned, Frey and Morgan are both very, very powerful attackers. GuardianE probably a little bit less so, but a different color. She's grass, so that might be something that you need to fill out and round out your box. So that's something worth considering. And then support-wise, Mars is pretty irreplaceable on a World Boss team, so if you don't have her, that's definitely a consideration. C-Day activates that strategy with the double-edged blade with fire attackers. So honestly, that's a pretty good choice too. So Lesson 7, certainly a little bit more difficult of a decision, especially for veteran players out there. I will say that it really comes down to what unit can really fulfill or complete a gap that's in your team compositions, in your roster currently, and can really serve that purpose for you. Alright, so that is Lisa's Extra Lessons in a nutshell. Like I said, it's an amazing event for people to catch up. It's an amazing event for people to kind of fill in the gaps in the barracks that they have, what units they have, or were able to pull or uncap over time. This is just a great opportunity, so don't squander it. Pick carefully, choose what you want, but also just kind of give it some thought because, this doesn't come around that often, and we don't know when it's going to come around again, but it's certainly a huge, huge opportunity for you to be able to kind of equalize yourself as a newer player for sure. So I certainly hope that was helpful for some of you out there. I know that there were a bunch of people that were asking about strategies for going through Lisa's Extra Lessons and who they should be strategizing and going for, so hopefully I gave at least some information to help you make an educated decision for yourself and for your account. Let me know in the comments below who you end up choosing for each of the lessons. Hopefully you all enjoyed the video, and if you did, please feel free to leave us a like, comment, and subscribe to the channel for more Destiny Child content. We thank you all so much for watching and taking time out of your day to spend with us. We really, really do appreciate it. Hopefully you all are staying safe, healthy, and secure out there, and certainly wishing the best for you, your loved ones, and your friends. And until next time, let's keep on slacking.